Hey, you hear that? It's Christmas. And while podcasters around the planet debate the merits of taking a break for the holidays or putting out episodes, we choose the latter. And of course, do it in a passive-aggressive style, delivering it at the same time Santa arrives. For the last 6 years, Terry Dimonte and I have been getting together for some Christmas cheer. We talk radio, now some podcast, and everything else about the past year and the year to come. Stay warm, stay healthy, Merry Christmas, and enjoy.
So how are you, Matthew?
I'm well. You?
I'm okay.
How's the BC life working for you?
Yeah, moved to BC, and BC life is fine and dandy. Thank you very much. It's been interesting. I don't miss the cold, and I love the change. I don't miss the politics. Don't miss my nostrils being frozen like this. I don't miss the petty provinciality of what people argue about in Quebec. I had enough of that. Unfortunately, we moved out just as the biblical floods descended on the Fraser Valley, not too far from where we live. So our timing, I guess, could have been better. They did say prepare yourself for the rain, but they didn't say anything about building an ark. Jesus Christ.
I actually had that down on the list here. Build an ark is in the show prep. I actually wrote that out.
Really, eh?
Somehow events find you, Terry. I mean, you went for a trip to Los Angeles in 1992 and found yourself in the middle of the LA riots.
Yes, and I went to Malibu 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and the Airbnb that I had rented on Malibu Beach was unavailable to me because Malibu was on fire. So, yeah, it follows me around. It really does. My wife is not pleased about these biblical events following us around. But like I said, they did say, you know, it rains a lot out there. Holy shit.
You beat the snow, but then you lost to the rain.
Yeah, but you know what? My wife Jess has a saying that's important to her that ends with shuffle the cards. And it's all about new chapters, right? She has a new chapter here. I have a new chapter here. And I'm not afraid of new chapters. You know, I moved to Calgary when I just turned 50 and changed radio stations a bunch of times. And each one of them was an adventure. And I've been coming out to British Columbia for many, many years and really, you know, have enjoyed it, enjoyed the people, enjoyed the lifestyle, and thought now that I'm retired, I can set up a home in BC. And I've done just that.
You say retired, yet you haven't exactly gone away because we hear from you all the time. You're doing work. And, you know, about two people in the last month of your broadcast on Shome, when the word retirement came up, they said, you'll be busier than ever. Are you?
Yeah, busier than I want to be, I think. I think what happens, you know, you don't know it until it happens. You don't understand what it is you're doing and how to do it, how to deal with it until it actually happens. I've been public about this on other podcasts. I didn't retire. My contract wasn't renewed. And it's something that's going on across the business. You and I have talked about it before in previous podcasts, I'm sure. But guys of my ilk that were well paid and in turn delivered a strong audience, that business model is out the window. It doesn't exist anymore. They don't want to pay people anymore. It almost seems to me like they had a meeting of the families like they did in The Godfather, and they all got together and said, we got to get rid of the old school talent and the money they make and push them out. So that's been happening all across the land, and it's a new model in the industry. And if it works, I guess they're the smart people. So when you realize you're just going to be, you know, the foot of the company is on your back and you're just going to be pushed out, you think that's fine. I had a great run. I had lunch with Brother Jake 2 days ago, and we talked about how lucky we were, the era that we came up in, the fun that we had. You know, we were two old disc jockeys reminiscing about what great fun we had and what a great time we were in the broadcast industry and how grateful we were to have been able to work in that era with people that we loved and who were good to us. And, you know, it was a ball. And Jake's a wash of gratitude, so am I. But the machinations of May 28th doing your last morning show and June 1st waking up and going, hey, we're retired. And I don't have anything to do. And then June comes and goes, and July and August. And I found myself stumbling into things, like the podcasts with Ted and other things, because for me personally, I don't really know what retirement is. I don't golf. I don't fish. I've said that on the last podcast with you. I love to read and, I'm just not sure what to do. I'm going to be 64 in January. I feel like I'm 44. I still think I have things to offer, but nobody's asking. The phone doesn't ring. One of the things that I've found is, I went from being an influential English Montrealer for many, many years, right up until June 1st. And then I didn't hear from anybody. And it's a very, very strange feeling. And I'm not waiting for somebody to play a violin. I'm just telling you, people that have been retired or step away from something that they've enjoyed and loved doing for 35 or 40 years, that takes quite an adjustment. And I'm in the middle of that right now, working my way through it with the help of my wife.
So interestingly, right after you left Shome, about a month or two later, you came to Winnipeg, and you and I had wonderful dinners and discussions and talk. But I was most interested in what the first 6 months would be like without having the alarm clock, what that would do to your body. How does it feel when you wake up every morning, 7 days a week, not having that alarm clock?
That's been the biggest gift of all so far. There is a terrible toll that has taken. And anytime I tell people this story, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I'm not. I enjoyed every single moment of a very long and terrific career. However, getting up in the middle of the night for 35 or 40 years takes its toll on your body. My doctor has told me so. My doctor said, the lack of sleep has not been good for you. And he said, on June 1st, you're going to begin to heal your body with a regular night's sleep. And I can't begin to tell you how wonderful that has been, to be awake in the middle of the afternoon and not have that middle of the afternoon sweats. People who get up at 3:30 in the morning will tell you, by the time 4 o'clock in the afternoon comes, if you've not been able to relax or lie down, your face gets all warm. You're not thinking clearly. There's a sound of bees buzzing around your head. Anybody who's pulled an all-nighter and gone to work understands what I'm saying. And it's a lot easier to pull an all-nighter and go to work, when you're in your 20s. By the time you hit your 40s, that becomes very difficult. There's only one person that I ever met that had it down, and that was the incomparable Paul Arcand, who is, if not the country's most talented broadcaster, he's certainly the most successful broadcaster in the country. He works at the news talk station in French in Montreal. He's a massive, massive star, and he loves getting up early in the morning, like in the middle of the night. Paul and I had lunch a couple of times, and he said, oh, no. He said, I go to bed, sometimes at 7 p.m., and I absolutely love that time of day. I love being up in the middle of the night. And I'd never met anybody who was able to cope with it like he was. He just, is one of those guys that really enjoyed it. So that, as usual, Matthew, is my long-winded answer to say the gift of no alarm clock has been the very best thing about my so-called retirement.
Have you had any crazy-ass radio dreams?
Yeah, I have. I've dreamt of, not being able to get into the control room, and I've dreamt of people dragging me out of the control room. They're not frequent. I'm not going to die without being on the radio. If I had been a pilot for 40 years, I would imagine you'd have some dreams about flying an airplane, So, yeah, I have.
So your record hasn't run out while you're on the air? You haven't had that dream yet?
I haven't had that one yet. And perhaps it's because that happened to me a couple of times early in my career when we were still using LPs. I'm sure I've told you this story before, when I got to Winnipeg in the summer of 78 and I was the all-night guy, and the feature at 3 a.m. was the City FM album side. And for the first couple of weeks I was there, they chose them for me. Then I could pick any album side I wanted. And one night I made the mistake of thinking, hey, there's almost 30 minutes on this side. And I lay down on the control room floor And I had the music loud enough that I thought I won't fall into a deep sleep. And I woke up, and only people who played records for a living will understand this. I woke up to the sound of shh, 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 shh. That's the sound of the record or the tone arm at the end of the vinyl. And I don't know how long I was out, but all the lights on the phone were blinking because people were phoning, wondering what had happened. I only did that twice. So maybe that's why I haven't had that dream yet, because it actually happened to me.
How much fun is it getting back together with Ted Bird after so many years apart with microphones?
It was a lot of fun. The podcast thing is very strange. We were lucky enough to have been invited by Mike Ward, who's a very famous comedian in Quebec and works in both languages. Mike and his partner Pantelis asked us to do a podcast. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And Ted and I talked about it. And the next thing I knew, I was on an airplane and gone back to Montreal for the weekend. We recorded 10 episodes. We had a lot of fun. It was very strange because you have to get used to the fact that there's nobody listening. You're not live. So there's that weird thing. And there's nobody to answer to. So you're in complete control creatively and otherwise. It took a couple of episodes to get used to that. And it was well received, relatively well received. I think 5,000 people or 5,500 people have watched it on YouTube. I don't know what the analytics are on the downloads and all of that because Pantelis and Mike have that. And, that's fine. We didn't set the world on fire, but podcast world, nobody knows better than you. One podcast cutting through the podcast pile of however hundreds of millions there are, it's a rough go. So we did what we wanted to do. We did what we thought we would enjoy. And we had a good time. We had a lot of laughs. And like I said, we got some nice feedback. And through the 10 episodes, I was able to attract, I think, some pretty stellar guests for the Christmas episode, which was an audio only. Nobody said no to me, which was really lovely. I asked Jan Arden. I asked Peter Mansbridge. I asked Krista Berg. I asked PJ Stock. And everybody said, yeah, sure. Just tell me when. I really took on an awful lot. And really, my wife, Jessica, took on an awful lot because she, by default, became the executive producer of it here at our home in British Columbia and was trying to cobble together the audio and the video. We just didn't have the equipment for it. We just weren't up to the task. So we released it as an audio podcast. And I guess about 1,000 people have watched it on YouTube or listened to it on YouTube. And I'm assuming another few thousand have downloaded it. And if that brought some Christmas joy to some people, that's fun. And we'll do another season in January. We've already lined up guests for season 2. We're going to have some guests. And then we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's something I'm going to want to continue or not. We'll see how it goes.
Somebody tweeted at you, his name was Benoit, the other day, and you responded to him. And this has always been the difficulty of podcasts. I mean, for many, many years, it was like, how do I find it? Where is it? And then I had to say to people, it's that purple thing on your phone. What do I do? And Benoit just said, I don't understand how podcasts work. What's a season? How many episodes in a season? And so one of the things I tell people is you do it when you just want to do a set amount of episodes and sort of catalog it that way. But sometimes we're a little too complicated over in the tech side of things for the listener who just wants to find what they want to listen to.
Yeah. Again, I guess that's us kind of swinging the white cane. We're kind of blind about it. I didn't know what to call it. We recorded 10 episodes and Ted and I said, well, in television, they used to call that the first season. So we went with that. And to your point, probably just confuse people. We probably should just say on Wednesday, January the 40th, we'll have another episode.
Yeah. Podcasts are set up for seasons based on the number of true crime that are out there, things like Serial that are a series. You and I went through the whole thing with The Sopranos. When is the next season coming out? It comes out when David Chase finishes it and James Gandolfini finishes his negotiation, and it would come out whenever
it came out. Like Curb Your Enthusiasm, a lot of them now. And I get that that's the way the new world works. The reason that we called them seasons, I guess, is because we had recorded 10 in a row. Ted and I talked about, first of all, from a professional point of view, The studio that Mike Ward and Pantelis have is a professional studio. And Ted and I work much better in a studio looking at each other, across from each other, being physically in the same room. That's what we're used to. This thing that you and I are doing, it's okay. I like visiting with you and seeing you. For people that have downloaded this and are listening to just the audio, Matt and I can actually see each other. And that's a nice thing. But there's something about what happens when Ted and I are in the same room. There's a chemistry, something that isn't describable that happens when we're in the same room, which necessitates me, flying back to Montreal, going into that studio and recording the sometimes 2 or maybe 3 episodes a day. And again, I'm just describing it. I'm not complaining because we have a ball doing it. It reminds me of when we used to do radio together, only we have a full night's sleep and neither one of us are hungover.
And let's remember that other part that you mentioned. There's no one to answer to.
There's no one to answer to. And that in itself took a couple of episodes to get used to. It was strange. But in terms of return, in terms of, are we reaching anybody? Are we reaching an audience? Do you want to keep churning them out and putting the work in? Because as you've pointed out many times, you got to work at it. And I got to decide whether I want to work that much, and we'll see what happens.
There's no feedback. This is, I think, one of the only pieces of media that you put out there where you can see the download numbers or you can see the traction or the reaction, but there's no hit line. There's no going to the coffee shop and somebody saying, hey, I heard you this morning.
People have been very nice. I don't have a massive following on social media, but there's 16,000 people that follow me on Twitter. So as somebody said to me, if you think about 16,000 people, that's almost the Winnipeg Arena, 3/4 sold out.
No, that's oversold. We're 14,995.
There you go. I didn't know. And out of those, 16,000 people, I don't know how many people certainly follow me, know about it because I tweet about the podcast all the time. And we do get some nice feedback on our Facebook page. The Standing By podcast has a Facebook page, and I've set up a YouTube channel, and we'll see what happens there. And people have been very, very nice, and been the odd comment. But as you point out, it's almost an anonymous endeavor. So it's hard to gauge whether or not it means anything to anybody.
You've also got my cousin Geoff Allan doing the voiceover for your podcast.
That's correct. Yeah, I forgot that he was part of the family. Geoff is our voiceover guy.
Geoff has an incredible story, and that just reminds me, I've got to bring him on my podcast at some point.
Yes, you do. He was our very first guest on one of our episodes. We had him in, and we had a nice conversation about his life in the hotel world, which I find fascinating because I love hotels, and I love nice hotels, and the way they function and the way they work, the way the hospitality game works has always fascinated me. And Geoff had some great stories to tell about some of the storied properties that exist in this country.
He worked Lake Louise, and when I was in Edmonton, he was in Jasper. How lucky was I?
Yeah, he was king of the Fairmont land for a while. And, the Fairmont, they have, it's Allcore now, but they're still called the Fairmont properties. Those are all the old classic CP hotels. The Hotel Vancouver, the Royal York, the Queen Elizabeth, the hotel up in Tremblant, Jasper, Lake Louise. These are the hotels that Van Horn built. And to me, they're so steeped in Canadian history. And a lot of them, like the Banff Springs that I just got back from, you could never build that property today. If, God forbid, something was to happen to the Banff Springs Hotel, it would be gone forever. You could never rebuild that magnificent castle. And the way those giant properties function and, the way they treat their guests like they're, everybody's royalty it's fascinating to me. And Geoff was well-versed in that world. So when we had him on, we had a nice chat about that. So you should have him on your podcast. He'd be much more interesting than I am.
By the way, people don't know this. They've heard Geoff before because every Sunday, if you watch NFL football, he does the Burger King ads. I hear the ad and I go, damn, Geoff, that's good.
Yeah, he does a good read, and we're thrilled to have him on the Standing By podcast.
I think he took up voice acting and getting serious in the voiceover business in his early 50s or late 40s.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating story to me because out here in British Columbia, it's one of the things I'm going to do in the new year. I've always wanted to be on a movie set And I thought, I have time now. I can be old guy on bench. I'll be man with shopping bag. So I talked to a couple of people out here about being an extra on a movie set, just so I can see what it's like to be on a movie set, because I've always wanted to. And I'm also having lunch in the new year with a couple of agents who are interested in new voices. So as Geoff points out, it's never too late.
Tell me about the camera aspect, being filmed while you're doing the podcast. You good with it?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. As Pantelis pointed out, Pantelis' partner there, whose studio we work in, he said, most people download the podcast and listen to it in the car or listen to it while they're cooking or whatever. Not many people are watching it. But I did have some people send me screenshots of them watching it on their television because they got a kick out of watching me and Ted. And I'm at an age now where I'm just not that self-conscious anymore. I used to be really, really worried, but, you get to a point in your life where you're thinking, I don't give a shit. I take pride in my personal appearance and I don't like to go out unshaven or not properly dressed. And I don't mean that, but I mean, anybody who's been on television knows this. When you're on television, you spend all your time looking at what television does to you, which is exaggerate you. It exaggerates all of your flaws and your facial features. So your wrinkles look deeper and, your chins are more defined, and that can wreak havoc with your confidence when you're in your 30s. And I know because I did television in my 30s for CBC and CTV, and we'd watch the broadcast back and I'd spend all the time looking at my hair. But now I don't. So once we can see the television cameras in the studio and we can see what we're shooting, and then I forget about it. I just, I focus in on what Ted is saying, and Ted and I, we spark off of what each other is saying. And if you're not paying attention, that falls on its face. So again, I'm being long-winded without answering the question, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. If people want to see Ted and I in all our 60-something glory, then have at it.
Yeah, it's always a great idea to be on YouTube, especially if you're doing the show that you're doing. Definitely get the cameras going. Be on YouTube. It's the number 2 search engine in the world where people will find you. And for what I do, which is I do a lot of biography stuff, and I narrate around people, and I want to highlight and paint, and that's an audio experience. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to do with what you did with your specials, and that's you can post it up on YouTube with a still image.
I'm going to look into it when Ted and I get together in January for the quote unquote new season. I'm going to ask if I can leave the video with the professionals at Pantelis' studio to see if we can get it up, albeit late, but get it up nonetheless. Because one of the things that I noticed putting a YouTube channel up, I posted, there was a guy named Didier Benoit. Didier Benoit is a young Quebec filmmaker who does astonishing work. And he asked for permission to follow me on my last morning at Shome. And he put together this really moving, touching, heartfelt film that opens with me driving into the garage on that morning and closes with my wife throwing her arms around me at the end of my show and everything in between. And it's the kind of quality that you would have seen on MTV in New York. It's so beautifully done, and nobody saw it. So I put it up on the YouTube channel, and I got all kinds of instant feedback. It went from 2 people to 200 people really quickly, having looked at something that nobody had seen. So your point about YouTube is quite something. And, the conversation that I had with Jan Arden, the conversation I had with Krista Bergen, the conversation I had with Peter Mansbridge, I just took small Christmas snippets out of those conversations. They're much longer conversations that I think I'm going to put up on the YouTube channel so people can find them.
Good. And by the way, everything you've talked about is in the show notes of this episode, including that video, which I will embed into the blog, and more people will connect to it.
You mean the video of my last morning? I sound like I'm blowing smoke up my own arse, but it isn't about me. It's about the quality of the piece that Didier did. He's a very talented young filmmaker. We did a video for Facebook with Randy Renault about a week before my last show, and hundreds of thousands of people watched it. And he produced it like it could have been a network television show. He's a very, very talented guy.
I know you've hinted twice, well, I'm thinking about this, or I might do this, or I might do that. Inside your studio, you're all set up. You got the guitars on the wall. You got a great sounding microphone. I know you got a ring light in front of you if you want to, come on the camera and stuff like that. You are completely set up and you're like, yeah, think about it.
Nobody knows better than you, Matthew. It's a pain in the ass. It's a lot of work. You record the thing and then you got to edit it and download it. And I mean, it's not like work in a coal mine, but your house in Winnipeg is like a factory. Like when I was visiting you in the summertime, yes, we had a lot of pool time and we had a lot of time and we had wonderful dinners and it was great to see the kids and all of that. But I could tell if I hadn't have been there, you would have been working from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. And it's one thing to get Jan Arden to say, hey, yes, I'll do it. And then you have the conversation and then you have in front of you this huge amount of content that you now have to sort through and figure out, because you want to do it professionally and properly. So, yeah. And by the way, I should say, and nobody can see this isn't on video, but Matthew's describing my office in my house in BC, and the guitars on the wall are my wife's. My wife is a very talented musician and guitar player, and the music room has been co-opted by the podcast. So it's the music room first and the podcast room second.
Do you listen to any podcasts yourself?
I do. I haven't spent a lot of time this summer listening to podcasts, but I just finished downloading a bunch because we're headed back east for the holidays on Monday. And now with all the time we'll be in the car and on the airplane, I downloaded a bunch. I'm a big fan of TCM, the Turner Classic Movies, has a terrific podcast, and they have seasons. The first season was Peter Bogdanovich, and being a film buff and a movie lover, I absolutely loved it. And this year it's on Lucy, the Ricardos, Lucy and her husband, Desi. And the name of the podcast is Matthew. Do you remember? I want to give it a proper plug. Here I am in my phone, in my podcasts, and the first one that comes up is Standing By.
The Plot Thickens.
The Plot Thickens, yes, or the Thought Plickens. I'm also a very, very big fan of It Was Said by the great author, historian, commentator John Meacham. He's got a terrific podcast. David Tennant, the actor in Britain, had a terrific podcast that I loved, but he hasn't put any episodes out in a while. To your point, you got to keep coming. I like the Sunday Sit Down with Willie Geist. I like Bill Simmons. I was a massive fan of the West Wing podcast because the West Wing Weekly, it was called. There were 82 episodes. I think it's done now. But I loved the West Wing so much that I just gobbled that up. My wife has a podcast called The Concert Goers, which I also enjoy listening to as two concert fans. She does it with a good friend of hers, Gianni Fiaschi. And I like that podcast very much. And they talk about shows that took place that they were at. And it's a lot of fun if you're a music fan. It's called The Concert Goers. And I like some of Smartless, which is Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes and Will Arnett. Although here's the thing that I find about actors who have podcasts. They can't get out of their own way. Actors have trouble letting the spotlight shine on other people. And I find that as much as I admire those three guys, they're terrifically talented. And the three of them, of course, with their station in life, they've been able to get some great guests. Paul McCartney, for one. I listen to them and I'm like a program director. I pull my hair out because they just cannot get out of their own way because they want to be the focus. That's the nature of an actor, I think. So there's a whole host of podcasts that I've been listening to. So
one that I want to get to is Talking Sopranos, which is, you already have that there. Yeah. See, it's already on your phone. You just didn't mention it. Probably because you were trying to be a little bit more brief because you thought that we had to get to commercials.
Yeah. Well, brief is something I've never been, Matthew, as you're aware, as a former assistant program director. To quote all my program directors, He never shuts up.
My dad said that.
Your dad said that too. That's right.
I was at Atwater and Sherbrooke, and he's still talking by the time I get to the Olympic Stadium.
God love him.
And people have the same complaint today about radio, only it's not Terry, it's the commercials.
Yeah, listen, I always thought, hey, if people are bored of me, then they'll tune out and they'll go looking for Drake on Virgin, and then they'll come back. That's the way I used to think about it. Anyway, yeah, you wanted to talk Sopranos because greatest television show in the history of the world. And I listened to 2 of the episodes. You'll be able to answer this for me, Matt. I found them a little bit long. The 2 episodes I listened to were well over 2 hours. And I found, again, actors largely unfocused. There's no script in front of them. And, who am I to criticize Michael Imperioli? And, but it's just, I find brilliant actors with a script can make you believe anything, but put them in front of a microphone without a script and it gets a little long in the tooth.
Well, let me flip it around and ask you, have you ever picked up a book and said, this is just too damn long?
No, I have not. I've picked up books and said, this is too damn boring.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with long, is long can also get boring.
But my favorite books are autobiographies. And I'm a lover of history. So if you read anything by John Meacham, for example, they're long, but they're extremely well written and fascinating. And by the way, while we're talking about books, if you're a broadcaster and you're between the ages of, 25 and 65, read Peter Mansbridge's book. It's just terrific. It's a short, snappy read, and it's a chronicle of history, and it's fascinating.
You mentioned you're getting on a plane and going somewhere for Christmas. What are your Christmas plans?
Well, it's odd this year because of the move to BC. So we are leaving on, you and I are chatting on a Saturday night. On the Monday morning, we will be on the big aeroplane. We're flying to Ottawa. And we're flying to Ottawa because my mom and dad lived in Cornwall for 19 years. And this year, they moved to Arnprior, Ontario, just outside of Ottawa. They moved there at the age of 85 to be closer to my brother and his wife, Tish, who have been in Arnprior for 30-some years. And they're within a 10-minute drive of mom and dad and about a 25-minute drive from my sister, Donna, who lives in Stittsville. So we're going to fly to Ottawa, be with mom and dad for a night. And Jess and I are going visiting. We're going to be in Barry's Bay, Ontario, in Peterborough, Ontario. And then we're going to be in Montreal for a couple of nights. And then I'm going to Arnprior to be with my family for Christmas. She's headed to St. Agathe to be with her family for Christmas. And we have both vowed that this will be the last Christmas that we spend apart. So it's a busy itinerary that involves a lot of travel in a rent-a-car. And we're very excited to see the people we're going to see. Not so excited about travel, but, everybody knows that's what happens at Christmas time. And like I said, we'll see what happens next year. Because of circumstances, my wife and I have spent Christmas apart the last 2 years, and that's going to end. That has got to stop.
What do you think about travel? You went to Alberta to go to Banff Springs. Is it stressful?
Yeah. Touch wood. We did all that we could do. We're vaccinated, and I am really fed up with listening to people who are not vaccinated and all of their fucking bullshit. There's a scientific way out of this goddamn thing that has hurt so many people and canceled so much stuff. And we spend all of our time arguing with these lunatics about chips and government and all the other nonsense. It's getting so frustrating and annoying about my rights and blah, blah, blah. Just get your fucking jab so that we can all get back to business. I don't know about you, Matt. I don't know what's happening in Manitoba, but in British Columbia, we have a vaccination Q code on our phone, and you make a reservation at a favorite restaurant. You wear your mask to your table, and you take your mask off, and you enjoy yourself. And I'm comfortable because I'm assuming I'm eating with other people who also believe in science and have been vaccinated. That brings me comfort. I flew a bunch of times this year. We were on an airplane to Banff, which is a quick jaunt for us. It's Abbotsford to Calgary. It takes about an hour. I came to see you from here, from Vancouver to Winnipeg, which was, a couple hours. And as long as you're masked, now you have to be vaccinated to get on an airplane. You wear your mask the whole time. I have no tolerance for people who wear the mask on their chin on an airplane. And it's been my experience over the 3 or 4 flights I've had this year. The airlines also have no tolerance for it. Mask up, sir, please, over your nose. They only ask you once. And, with the frequent washing of hands, the mask wearing, and the vaccinations, I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable with it. My wife and I are going to travel on Monday, and you need extra time at the airport, and there's a few extra hoops you have to jump through. But I'd rather do that and be with my family for Christmas than not. So to answer your question, yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I don't know if I would be comfortable going to San Francisco or jumping on a plane right now to Florence, just because of, I don't know what other countries are doing and I don't know how things are spreading. But again, never mind be a scientist. You don't even have to be a high school grad to look at the charts and look at the number of people who ended up in hospital who were unvaccinated and the number of people who were in hospital who were vaccinated.
Well, every province, by the way, has their bunch of loons. And so shout out to Southern Manitoba, who have an extraordinary amount of cases. So my guess is that they talk about in Southern Manitoba, these gatherings. I have not received a single invite to the orgies they're apparently having amongst themselves to cause themselves to get sick and be in the hospital.
It's social media driven and it's lunatic driven and it's conspiracy theory driven. And, I remember, you and I are both old enough to remember a time when you took your children to school, the first thing they asked you for was your vaccination papers. If your kids weren't vaccinated against measles and polio and mumps and what, you could go to get another school and go to school somewhere else. That's just the way it was. I don't know what's happened to us.
Well, so the people who have the deepest religious affinity are the ones doing the devil's work. How'd that work out?
Yeah, I didn't want to get off on a rant here, but it's really getting frustrating. Here in British Columbia, we just got to the point where you can now go out. For the longest time, there was one door to go in and one door to go out and, walk all around the building so we can control the crowds. We've just got to a point where you actually can have a couple of entrances to buildings and people don't go out of their minds. But I long for the days of normal and I want to go back to Florence. We had an annual trip that we had to the Bahamas with good friends of ours. Well, annual. We went once and fell in love with it and want to go back. But understandably, my wife, who's younger than I am, is worried about, the availability for medical resources when we travel because of this shitstorm that could be held at bay if everybody would just go get a jab and play along and be nice.
I just came back from Bermuda. They tested me at the airport, tested us at day 4, test us again day 10, and possibly a test for your trip home as well.
Were you comfortable in Bermuda?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a dumb question, but you know what I mean. In terms of crowds and controls and...
The sign at customs when you get there is 3 rules. Mask up indoors, stay outdoors and have lots of fun, and don't go to super spreader events. That's it. And guess what? All we're doing is we're playing hide and seek from a virus. And if you follow those 3 rules, you're going to win the game of hide and seek.
Yeah. Lying on the beach, you're probably okay.
Oh, yeah. That was good. Terry, thanks for doing this again this year. This is the 6th one we've done.
Are we boring the hell out of people? Do we even talk about anything?
Usually I get email on Christmas morning and people saying, that was great. I haven't had my coffee yet.
Well, that's nice. Merry Christmas, by the way, to if you're listening to this on Christmas morning, God love you. Merry Christmas. I appreciate that's nice to hear that at least some people are listening to it. And it's become a routine that I enjoy very, very much, by the way.
It's also one of the only releases that's going to come out on Christmas morning, which is why I like to do it.
Yeah, that does help.
My best to Jess.
Yeah, she's downstairs watching the Canadians lose, and I will give her a hug and a kiss for you, Matthew. I love you, pal. Thank you for having me again.
I love you too. Merry Christmas. Sorry we're not going to see each other this year, but we'll see each other again this summer.
Let's keep in touch with our thumbs.
All right. Love you, Tara.
I love you too, pal.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
The Sound Off podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Social media by Courtney Krebsbach. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. Imaging courtesy Core Image Studios. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.